Hey, everybody. Welcome to Grilling at the Green here in Portland, Seattle, up and down the West Coast, pretty much everywhere, and on the Golf News Network channel at iHeart. I'm JT, as I said. How's your game doing this week? I bet it's not as good as this guy's. Bob Harig is with us this week, and his new book, Drive. It's about Tiger. We're going to jump into that in a minute. But first, we'd like to thank the folks at Painted Hills Natural Beef. Beef you can be proud to serve your family and friends, and beef like nature intended. You know, Bob, people ask me, say, why do you do the food stuff? Uh, because on the other side of my work, I'm an all food guy. So there you go, and hence my svelte figure. So, and we'd also like to thank the Oregon Crab Commission. From sea to plate, the Oregon Dungeness crab is a wonderful product. And if you ever get out this way or you can find it in your store, I recommend it highly. Bob, you ever eaten Dungeness crab?
You know what? I never have, and I feel like I'm missing out on something.
You are. Trust me on that. You are. Okay, so you got a new book coming out in a little over a month called Drive, and it's about Tiger's uh, kind of comeback and heading up to the 219 Masters, which he won. But I wanted to ask you, what is your relationship with Tiger and the quote unquote Woods camp? You seem to be able to talk to him more. And Stevie D from USA Today, I know he's had some health issues, but you two seem to be able to get Tiger to talk.
Yeah, my relationship with him has been very good. I think over the years, I really appreciate that he's let me in at times, and frankly, his camp has been always good to me. Now, lately, because of the fact that I've been involved covering the broader game, including live golf, they've taken some issue with that, and it's caused some problems in that I think they're not recognizing that I have a job to do. I don't take sides,
Right.
and when live came along, as we are seeing to this moment, to have ignored it would have been negligent. I mean, it's like it's not my job to decide what's right or wrong in this fight.
Hmm.
And I think there was some sense I gave it legs by covering it. And you know what? If they feel that, I understand why they would be upset. But the idea that we would ignore it is kind of silly. And so that might have caused some tension. Tiger's not been around that much over the last year. Now I saw him twice in the Bahamas. I saw him at the PNC with his son. My access to him is limited, but Tiger was cordial and answered my questions. I have nothing but good to say about him, and really his agent and the people that are around him. They've always been good, and I'd like to think that they would understand, eventually that, especially as they're working towards an agreement with these same people, that this was an important story in the game that you couldn't ignore.
It's not going to go away. I know there was a section of people that, when it first started kind of bubbling up, that it would go away. I never thought it would go away, but as I told you before in one of our discussions, I had some dealings with the Saudis, and so I was just urging caution, which
Hmm.
nobody cares what I say anyway on the issue. But the point is, I was kind of urging caution. But now we've seen it permeate into this supposed agreement and working on that and all this stuff. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in after hours. But it the live thing was never going to go away. So, as one of my friends said, who worked for the Saudis for years, he goes, when they set their sights on something like this, it's almost inevitable that you have to deal with them. So that's just where it is.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I had my questions about live starting out, but there you've as this has gone along, you have seen that they are determined,
Hmm.
and the amount of money that they have spent suggests that they can wreak havoc if they want. Um, is Live as a separate entity aside from the PGA Tour sustainable in the long term? I have my doubts about that because of numerous factors. But
Sure.
right now, they signed John Rahm. It looks like Adrian Moronk. They keep talking to guys. At some point, we're gonna in 2024. Other than the majors, we are not going to have three of the last five major champions in any tournament
Yeah.
with Scotty Scheffler and Jordan Spieth and Colin Morikawa. I mean, that's just not good.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how we got to this point. We are at this point. And do we want them to all come back together or not? That's
Yep.
my thing at this point. And I think that it's important and look, if they work something out, then the PIF has a seat at the table. They're not running it. They just have a seat at the table. Do you want them to run it? Well, you run the risk of them getting more and more, involved if you don't work with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's unfortunate. A lot of people don't like that, and that upsets them. I get it.
Well, like we said, though, it is inevitable. They've got the money. They can flex their muscle. And even though we've had players, rally and rail against they would never go, like John Rahm. If that check is big enough, you got to stop and take a deep breath and look at it and say,
Yeah.
uh, my family, my current family, my grandkids, my great grandkids, 5 generations from now would never have to work with that kind of money, or they would be they would be solid, kind of no worries on the financial front if they take care of it. So that's a big deal for people.
I, I think it's easy for us to sit here and tell others what they should do.
Yes.
And if you or I were offered life changing money, but yet it meant that we had this sort of nebulous, company that we would be either directly or indirectly working for. I mean, yeah, it might be a tough call, but ultimately, I think you do your homework and you try to figure out what's best for you. As I've said all along, without condoning this, I always have to preface it. I'm not condoning it. Like if you hate it and don't want to be involved with them for all the reasons that we know, that's fine, and I will totally respect that. But the other side of the issue is that the PIF's sort of dealings in the world of finance are immense. It's complicated. U.S. businesses do deals with them, are involved.
Mm-hmm.
The tour's biggest sponsor, FedEx, they deliver packages to Saudi. In fact, the PIF invests in FedEx. I
Yep.
mean, so like it's just sort of like when people bring up China and the NBA. It's complicated. I think it's beyond some of our reach in terms of we're just trying to talk about sports. And, would it have been better if this had never happened? Probably. Because I think what's gone on is that golfers and their agents have come to this idea that the players are worth more than they've been getting. I tend to agree with them to a point, but they're not worth what they're about to be getting. It's not sustainable. These $20 million purses we're learning on the PGA Tour, it's just beyond their reach at this time. The,
Right.
the commercial the commercial value of sponsoring a tournament and getting your return for a sponsor is just not there. They don't want to pay that. So it got a little out of whack here. And obviously, when you've got an entity like the PIF that can pay whatever it wants, it sort of artificially jacks it all up.
Yes.
And now here we are, and the tour is needing outside funding, and needing to find ways to come up with other ways to meet these purses on their nonprofit side, and it's a complicated deal. And I have tons of respect for all the people involved. A lot of these guys are getting criticized, like Jay Monahan. I just don't think it's an easy job or it's an easy situation to have dealt with.
No, it isn't. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back with Bob Harig and talk about his new book, Drive. It's kind of a in-depth look at Tiger coming back to the through all the pratfalls and pitfalls to the 219 Masters and beyond. So stay with us. We'll be back in just a jiff. Welcome back to Grilling at the Green. I'm JT. We're very fortunate to have Bob Harig with us today. His new book, Drive. Speaking of Drive, this is where, and I think you did this one other time, Bob, but we have a little golf trip travel tip right now. It's brought to you by one of our great sponsors out here, Weston Kia. All the time you've been jetting around the world covering golf tournaments, and you're lucky because you live in Florida, and that's kind of the home of professional golf as far as I'm concerned. What's the worst? I'll just put this for your travel tip today. What's the worst part of travel for you?
Well, I would probably say the airports.
Oh yeah, they suck.
And I don't mean to disparage any one airport. I just mean in general, just the whole process.
Yeah.
Getting there, checking in, going through security, the boarding process of a plane. It's just, it just is it's an added aspect to travel that is, look, let's be honest, it gets tiresome,
Yeah, it does.
And obviously there's delays, there's luggage being lost, there's all sorts of things like that go along with it. And look, I'm not alone. Many people deal with this, obviously, all sorts of business people, and it stinks if you're going on vacation. But I'm just trying to get to a place to do my job, and then you could have hours and hours worth of hassles just to get there, and you haven't even done 1 minute's work.
Right.
That's probably the hardest thing, the thing that I have issue with the most.
Yep, I would agree. I'm in the 2 million mile club, and when I started, man, it was a blast to travel. When I was finishing, not so much. Anyway, let's talk about the book. There's been tons of books written about Tiger. Would you call Drive one of the most definitive regarding his story, especially his comeback?
Well, it might be the first attempt to really dive into the comeback. I mean, I think it's definitive in sort of looking at his at his career from a golf standpoint and why he was as good as he was. It goes beyond the skill and the talent and obviously just the raw numbers, which most of us who follow golf know. I try to dive into why, and the why is the drive. I mean, how does a guy make 142 straight cuts? It's human nature to sometimes you just don't have it. I'm going to go home. I'm giving up. Tiger hardly ever did that. I don't think Tiger does that when he misses cuts. He is grinding it out to the end. And I have numerous examples of that in the book. Obviously, the big ones are coming back from the back surgery, winning the U.S. Open on one leg or, with the fractures after having not played, not practiced, coming back from the car crash, which is 3 years ago now. To think that basically a little more than a year later, he made the cut in at the Masters is remarkable. I mean, what kind of what did he have to go through to get there? And then of course he did it again last year before he had to withdraw. Those are the sort of the aspects of the book that I get into. The Masters 5 years ago now, the win is a big portion of the book because I think it's just such a big part of his story.
It's such a remarkable feat, if you will. And I'm not talking FEET. And no, you didn't misspell it in the book, the copy you sent me there, Bob. But the point is, Tiger is human. He is. Okay. Yep. So I'm just I'm in such awe of him that it just kind of like he's almost not human to me in times. Back in his heyday, he was I read a thing, who was it? Dave Barry wrote something in one of his books or something, or one of his columns. And this was about like 2005 or something. And He does his yearly review, and he was talking about this, and he would always bring Tiger in on one of those, and he goes, they decided to cancel the tournament in Denver and just mail Tiger the check. You know what I mean? It was
Right.
like, and that was such a feat. I mean, the arguments about who's the best of all time, is it Jack or is it Tiger? I'm going with Tiger. Uh, just because of the things that you wrote about in this book, the tenacity, the never quit, the fortitude, and the working through the pain and the discomfort. And I can relate to that, not to inject myself in this, but I've had that back surgery. I have a, I've had knee surgery, and I'm an old fat guy. And for him to one, stay in shape and do all the stuff he's done, that's just remarkable.
It is, and there came a point where he didn't probably need to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Like what were you chasing? But yet he was determined to get back. I think Tiger realized how much he missed it. I think he wanted to go after it one more time. I'm not convinced he's done. I mean, I don't think it's going to be easy. I think it's the fact that he isn't going to play enough to get sharp is where the issue comes in. It's not that he doesn't have the skills. He still can hit the ball. He's still got a great, he can get the ball out there. His iron
Yeah.
play is phenomenal. He can probably work on his short game at home, but there's no way to approximate competition. And so we expect him to play at Riviera next month, and then probably maybe the Players Championship, and then the Masters. I mean, everybody else going into the Masters will have played 4, 5, 6, 7 times. They're honing their games. They're
Right.
working on it all the time. We don't know how much Tiger's able to put in at home. You know, if he plays a tournament, does he have to take the next week off completely just to recover? Can he get back after it after a few days? You know, you put Tiger in front of the ball, no problem. As we've come to learn, and as we've all taken for granted, you have to get from the tee to the ball in the fairway to the green, and that's an important part of golf.
It is. I mean, it really, really is. And when we come back, we're going to take another break. I want to kind of follow up on that a little more with Bob. We're talking with Bob Harig today from Sports Illustrated, and he's still standing, and so is SI. He just sent me a note there. I read it. And we're going to talk about his new book, Drive, when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Grilling at the Green. I'm JT. We're talking with Bob Harig today. Want to thank the folks that I'm just going to go through them really quick here. Bob, Painted Hills Natural Beef, and Birdie Ball, excuse me, and Pig Powder. That's my barbecue partner, Leanne's company. Best rub on the planet award. Go to pigpowder.com. So we're talking with Bob Harig about his new book, Drive. Um, we started into it, and then we had to go to break here, but he's overcome a lot of injuries, personal issues, that type of thing. And you were saying you thought he could come back. So I would propose this to you: with the way the live situation, and we talked about this at the first of the show, could that actually be a help to Tiger in a way that he's not stacked up against Rom and Kepka and all these guys? They went across the pond, so to speak. So could he um find a tournament? Not saying that he would do this intentionally, but when he got to a tournament, if he's playing pretty well, and you were talking about honing his skills a little bit, sharpening them up, I could see where the pull away from player or pull away with the players from LIV could possibly help him at least break that uh the Sam Snead record.
Yeah. The problem is I don't know how many events he's going to play outside of the majors.
Yeah.
I mean, Riviera, where he's never won, the venue he's played the most without a win, where he played his first event as a first pro event ever
Right.
as an amateur when he was 16 in 1992, I believe it was. He's never won there, and then he goes there right out of the box his first tournament, and it's typically chilly there in the LA mornings.
Right.
It's just not a conducive place for him really at this point. And then the Players Championship, which might be the next one, obviously Rom and Cam Smith and Brooks aren't going to be there, but it's still a stacked field. It's still, it's
Yeah.
a lot of guys. So, and then of course there's the majors where they're all at. So I'm not sure it gives him much hope of that unless he were to add some more stuff. I wish he would. I wish he'd be able to. The problem is what we were talking about earlier, the playing and then the recovery and getting ready again. If you're going to play the majors and then you want to play an event in between them, there's got to be enough time to kind of give yourself a break and then ramp back up. And where are those tournaments for him? It's like, can he play a tournament 2 weeks before a major? I don't know. That means that there's only 1 week in between. If he's spending that whole week having to recover, and he can't even really get around very well, which is we don't know. We don't know now.
Right.
He's talked. The surgery of his ankle last year after the Masters has done wonders for him. It's really helped. But I mean, how much? So those are the factors going in. And I don't know, Tiger just doesn't seem all that interested in playing. I've thought all along, like, go to some venues where it's an easier walk,
Hmm.
where the golf course isn't so strenuous, like you see at a major or at Riviera or Torrey Pines even. Um, Go to Colonial.
Yeah. It's flat.
Hit some irons off the tees. He's a world class iron player. He's only played that tournament once in his career. It didn't suit him. It didn't suit his power game. It might be good for him now. And Colonial isn't like a 20 under golf tournament. I think it would
No.
be perfect. But the problem with Colonial is, I believe it's the week after the PGA. Well, it's almost impossible to think he can play back to back weeks.
Yes.
So, and the same with Hilton Head, which is the week after the Masters. Like, that would be another really good place for him, I think. I think the Travelers would be good. Maybe too much under par, for him at this point, where, I think asking him to make a ton of birdies is not that great. But that's the week after the US Open.
Yeah. I wonder what goes through his mind, and maybe I mean, you kind of touched on it in the book, but when he reached the pinnacle of his golf prowess, if you will, each time he got hurt, he worked back up to that or as close to that as he could get. But I wonder how he evaluates that in his mind. Like you were just talking, playing on some flatter courses, something a little easier like that. That's one part of it, but the other part of it is, does he still stand up there and say, I can hit this 9 iron 176 yards and wrap it around a tree and put it 4 inches from the cup? I wonder if that's his mindset still.
I think it is, because I actually think he can do that.
Yeah.
If he's been working at it, he can do that. And that has not left him. The problem is when you get in a tournament in between the ropes and you've not done it in competition, do you trust it? Some of those shots are not natural. You had to have been practicing them, and you notice sometimes that when Tiger's not been playing great, or if he's not been playing a lot, he'll just go to some stock shots.
Mm-hmm.
He might just try to hit a cut and work with it. So uh, a lot of it depends on things that we just don't know. I mean, this is why whenever we get a chance to talk to him, like, you pepper him for how much you've been practicing, how much you've been playing. Like, you try to get a sense for how rusty he is or not. And when I watch him, I still find it's amazing. Like, I'm not probably looking at it from the standpoint of trying to compare him to Scotty Scheffler. I'm looking at just here's an amazing player still, who's not played very much, and look at what he's still bringing.
Well, you go back in the book and you were talking about you and Steve D from USA. The first time you ever watched him hit on the range and the noise, the sound that his clubs made striking the ball, and you'd never heard anything like that. And I think that's still true to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
They get TV coverage and stuff now, and of course with the advent of the internet and all the different shows and PGA Tour shows, et cetera, et cetera. They get guys out there with their steady cams and they're watching these guys warm up and stuff. But still, when you hear that noise, to me, it's still somewhat different than if you hear Scheffler, Kepka, or any of those guys hit the ball. Tigers just sounds different. And maybe it's because I'm a dyed in the wool Tiger fan. I don't know. But I'm just saying it still sounds different. He's still, whatever he found magically, you know, 30 years ago, it's still there.
Yep, Tigers is still an elite ball striker, and his peers talk about it sounding different.
Yeah.
It has a different sound. There's some guys who hit it solid like that. Tom Watson was one uh, who was like that. I think Scotty Scheffler is to a degree. He strikes the ball amazingly solid. Especially with all he's got going on in his swing, with his
Yep.
footwork and everything. Yet I don't think too many people compare to Tiger when it comes to that. There is a different sound, and it comes he comes off of there. It kind of snaps heads on a range. Like if a player is hitting balls and doesn't realize that Tiger has shown up and is a couple of spots behind him, when he starts getting out the middle to longer irons and he starts hitting them, it's sort of like, wow, what's that?
Yeah.
And they notice who's there. So yeah, it's still there.
Well, you reference it in the book, but and we've seen it many other times. Quotes, not only in written but verbally. People like Colin Montgomery talking about the first time he ever played with Tiger. He'd never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
He'd never been up against anything like that in his whole career. Ernie Els the same way. One of his quotes I can't say on this part of the show because this one actually goes on radio, but he was like, "Holy beep!" And what was that? I'm paraphrasing, but he was sending the ball with the velocity and height and that nobody had ever seen before, and accuracy too, for the most part.
Yep. Tiger sort of had a way of taking the air out of the guys playing against him, especially when he was at his best, because they realized that they might not have what he had, and now you're going up against that, and it was deflating at times. I mean, as great as Ernie is, as great as Phil is, as great as VJ is, they kind of had to go up against him and see him beat them more than anybody ever had. Now VJ really has had a great run and a great record with Tiger there. VJ 2003-4 time frame was really good. He won more than Tiger. Ernie had his share of wins too. Ernie got Tiger a few times,
Right.
but you wonder how much better Ernie's record would be if there was no Tiger. And same for Phil.
Yeah.
Now Phil has said, and this is in the other book about Tiger and Phil, but you know, yeah, I wonder how my career would have been if there had been no Tiger, but I do know he made me get better. And so maybe his record wouldn't have been as good if there was no Tiger.
True. We're going to take a break and we're going to come back and wrap up the show with Bob Harig, his new book, Drive. It's really good. It'll be out in March and I recommend it. Anyway, we'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back to Grilling at the Green. I'm JT. We're talking with Bob Harig today. His new book, Drive, The Lasting Legacy of Tiger Woods, be out in March. Bob was kind enough to get me an advance copy. And no, I didn't keep track of the grammatical mistakes in there, Bob. That's somebody else's job.
That's
Um,
good. Thank you for that. Yeah,
yeah,
there's
no
a few errors
problem.
in that. There's a few errors in that version you saw.
So we
Yeah.
got about 5-6 minutes here. You make references to and you talk to Steve Williams and Joe LaCava, two different people. But which one do you think had the best working relationship with Tiger? And I know they're different personalities. They're different. They're different guys, you know.
Yeah.
But which one do you think? To me, it was almost like Steve, and then this is an observation from afar. Steve was Tiger's junior assassin,
Yeah.
and Joe is like a steady hand on the rudder.
Yeah. I think the way I would answer that is to say that both of them were with Tiger at the right time for them.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, when Tiger was at his best and dominating, he needed a guy like Steve. He needed a guy who could tell him, no, you can hit this shot, or no, you can do this. And he needed sort of an enforcer type guy, who kind of, looked out for Tiger. He kept, he kept the media away. He was very, very confident and assured of himself in the heat of battle.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a great example of that at the 2008 US Open, where on that 72nd hole, Steve talked Tiger into the wedge shot that he hit. Tiger was not sold on it. And Steve was like, can you imagine, like, you're trying to tell this guy that, who's not really buying it, that this is what you absolutely have to do? And, Tiger hit it to 12 feet. It was the right thing to do. Joe came along at a time when Tiger was far more vulnerable. 2011, it's when the injuries started to hit. He hadn't won since the scandal. He had missed a lot of 2011 with an Achilles problem.
Right.
And then, sure enough, in 2012, they won 3 times. They won 5 times in 2013. And Joe was kind of like a steady hand. He wasn't the enforcer type, but Tiger maybe didn't need that then. And I'm not sure that Joe was like a forceful advocate for what was right and what was wrong on the course, but he would tell him when Tiger asked. And it was a good partnership there. And the thing is I would say that Tiger and Steve kind of left on bad terms,
Right.
and whereas Joe and Tiger did not. And so that's where, if there's a difference, that's probably it.
Do you think the door's still open for Joe and Tiger on this limited schedule?
Well, because he's working for Cantlay now, I don't see
Right.
how it works. He plays a full schedule. He plays a lot of tournaments. I can't imagine Cantlay wouldn't want to have him with him at the majors, which is
Right.
where Tiger's going to play. It's interesting to me. Joe was about as loyal as a person could be. He could have left many times, but this seemed like a very, very appropriate time. It was clear Tiger was not going to play anymore last year after the Masters. I think Joe still wants to work, and so he was able to hook up with a guy who's very competitive, obviously a contender often, and frankly, someone who he's going to make a lot of money working for.
Well, he probably will. I'm not. Maybe he doesn't. Well, he's got kids. He's got to put them through school. So Joe does, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah. So
Yep.
you never know. Um, when you were going back, Bob, and when you were putting this book together, and you've covered Tiger more or as much as anybody in his career, but was there one thing that turned on the light bulb in your head and went, "Wow, I I I didn't think of it that way."
Um, I'm not quite sure there's anything quite like that. I think I've been so immersed in it for so long that I came to like understand what he was all about, and how this wasn't in the book, wasn't about the book, but way back, I think I got a dose of what Tiger was all about, which was, I believe it was 2011. This was the summer when he had the issues with his Achilles
Mm-hmm.
and his knee. He hurt himself at the Masters that year during the third round, and he actually made a run on that Sunday. That's the year Schwartzel won. Tiger got on this great run. He got close, and then
Right.
he trailed off a little bit. And then, like 2 days later, they announced that he had injured his Achilles and he was going to be out for a while. And so, like, in other words, he didn't play at Quail Hollow, but he did come back at the Players Championship, which was in May at that time, and he only played 9 holes. He
I remember
withdrew
that.
after 9 holes.
Yeah.
Didn't come back again until August, where he played at the Bridgestone, where he had all kinds of success, and he really struggled there. Shot in the mid to high 70s. I think he might have finished like 78th out of 79 guys. And I remember asking him after the second round, like he was being hard on himself. And I'm like, and I asked something along the lines of like, why aren't you giving yourself a break? Like, why would you not think that this is going to take a little while?
Yeah.
And he kind of snapped at me a little bit, you know, like this is not how I am. I don't look at it that way. I come here to win. I don't care. I don't care what. And it was sort of like an eye opener. Like, yeah, this guy's built a little bit different because in anybody else coming, golf doesn't have rehab starts.
Right.
Golf doesn't have like baseball where you go down to the minor leagues and play 10 games to get yourself ready again. Um, you have to do it right there on inside the ropes. And so when you do come back, most guys sort of have this expectation. All right, I need to ease back into this. I might not have it right away. We saw that with Gary Woodland a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Gary had a brain surgery back in September, and he came back at the Sony Open, and he missed the cut. But I mean, he was just so thankful to be out there, and he
Right.
felt really good about what he got done. He shot 71-71 as 2 over par, missed the cut. He wasn't holding himself to an expectation that he was going to contend. And so, like, that's what I'm talking about. And that's no knock on Gary. Of course not.
Yes.
Like, most people need to get themselves back into it. Tiger was just wired differently that way.
That Bob, that might be the biggest understatement I've ever heard you say, is that Tiger was wired differently.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I'm not ripping on anybody. I think you nailed it there. The name of the book is Drive: The Lasting Legacy of Tiger Woods. Bob Harig, of course, and still at SI, and he's still standing, and so is SI. So, according to Bob, we're going to do after hours here in a minute. Bob, thank you so much. What the drop time is, what, March 24th or something? What?
March 26th,
26. Okay.
which is
Okay.
actually 2 weeks ahead of Masters Week.
Well, there you go. There you
Yep.
go. Okay. We got to get out of here. We want to thank all of our sponsors and thank you, the listeners. And we'll be back next week with another edition of Grilling at the Green. Go out, play some golf, and be kind, everybody. Hey everybody, welcome to After Hours here on Grilling at the Green. I'm JT along with Bob Harig today and his new book, Drive: The Lasting Legacy of Tiger Woods. So here's Tiger always said he was making progress. After he would get injured and he would play in a tournament and he would go to the presser and you and all the people in there would ask him and he'd look at you and just say, we're making progress. How many times do you think he said that in his career?
I don't know, 1,000 maybe. I mean, yeah. Yeah. I mean, Tiger was not one to it's funny. For the longest time, I thought Tiger overpromised.
Mm-hmm.
Like he tried to downplay any negatives. And then during this latter part of his career, when he's had issues, he's underpromised. Like 2 years ago, when he was coming back at the Masters, 6 weeks before at Riviera, he gave no indication that he would be playing in the Masters. He downplayed it big time. He's like, yeah, I got a long way to go, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I'll play golf sometime this year. It just didn't seem possible. But yet, deep down inside, he knew he was trying. He didn't let that on. And so, that has changed over the years. He's become much more about lowering expectations now. Now, this past time in the Bahamas, when he acknowledged, look, I'm feeling well enough that I think maybe I could play once a month. That was more of an honest and optimistic assessment, something we hadn't seen much in the last 5-6 years.
Mm-hmm. Do you think in your conversations with Tiger, does he think the 2019 Masters was the best or something exceptionally special to him? I know it's a major. I know his kids were there and that type of thing, but just the comeback, hence the book Drive. But how does he feel about that one in relationship? In the book, you rate it as the number one of all his
Right.
majors. Okay. But how does he think about it? Has he
Yeah,
ever shared that with you?
It's a good question. I think he looks at it as very, very special, and he might hold it in the highest regard for a lot of reasons. The comeback, he wasn't expected to win. He wasn't he wasn't the top guy.
Right.
First time he ever came from behind to win a major, which I've always thought was a bit of a kind of a dubious stat. I mean, in many of the majors, he was behind in the final round. He might have been the 54 hole leader and given up the lead and come back to win.
Right.
I think that stat is a little misplayed. Like you can't win from behind. Tiger didn't have to win from behind. He was always in front. Like why would that be? Why would that be a negative? So I do think he probably holds it in high regard in that context. If you were to say what was your greatest victory, he might go with 2000 U.S. Open, winning by 15.
Hmm.
And if he did, and by the way, in that ranking, I admitted recency bias might be getting the best of me here, but I just think when you added up all the factors, he wasn't Tiger of 10, 15 years ago. He
Right.
was a diminished Tiger. He had Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka.
Well,
Molinari had beat him at the Open the year before and had just won Bay Hill a few weeks before and was playing lights out and wasn't making any mistakes. He finally did, but he wasn't making any. And Tiger had a lot to overcome there. And all those top players in the mix. Schauffele finished tied for second. It was amazing, not unlike what Jack did in '86 when he had to beat Seve and Tom Kite and Greg Norman. There was a lot of guys in the mix that at that Masters, just like there was this one that Tiger won.
yeah. Always makes you wonder if Tiger has the rear view mirror in his car removed so he doesn't ever think behind him, you know?
Yep.
uh,
Yep.
I don't know. It's just like that. Have you ever played a round of golf with Tiger, Bob?
I played 3 holes with Tiger one time. He uh, he opened his first golf course design in Cabo in 2014,
Mm-hmm.
and I got invited, and I went because you know Tiger had been in the design business for a while, but none of his courses that he designed had opened. And those are not necessarily things that have anything to do with him. That's developers and
Right.
money, and but he had put together several golf course designs, and finally this one called El Diamante in Cabo was opening, and so they had kind of a big grand opening thing, and I went, and as part of it was he played the course, um, as to obviously it's sort of like the official first round, and he played 9 holes by himself where he had a microphone and people walked along with him and he talked about all the shots. And then when he got to the back nine, he there was 3 different groups of people that played 3 holes with him, and one of them was a media group, and one of them was Steve DeMeglio, who you mentioned
Yeah.
earlier, and then Ron Green Jr., who works in Charlotte for Global Golf Post. And we played 3 holes with Tiger, and yeah, I mean, look, it was a little bit nerve wracking. I do not have a game. I do not have a game to put on display at all. But I did par that first hole, the 10th hole. It was a short par four, so it made life a little bit easier. And Tiger, I get the sense that Tiger has been through that so many times that he just is at ease with it. You know, and playing in a group with a bunch of media guys is probably no worse than any pro-am that he's ever been in, and he was very gracious.
Yeah. When I've seen, videos and stuff of him doing that in pro-ams or with media people, he just seems to be, I got this, don't worry about it. Kind of chill almost on things with people like
Yeah.
that. And then when he walks to the first tee for real, Darth Vader comes out. But
The
it's
blinders. Yep,
yeah, with
absolutely.
blinders like that.
Yep.
Let's switch over to talk a little bit about Live before we wrap up here. You said that there's a lot going on. You said that in the before we came on the air today. So one question that I want to ask you, and you touched on it in the regular show a little bit, but do you think Moynihan can, or Monahan, I should say, excuse me, can he survive this? And I have no dog in that fight either way, but just from an outsider, I'm looking at that going between Norman, Jay, and I don't know what they call the, do they call him His Highness or something? He's got some sort of royalty.
His
His
excellency,
excellency.
yeah, Yasser,
Yasser.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Uh, I would think that one of the two guys, Yasser, isn't probably going anywhere unless they get him on this investigation thing they're doing now. Either Norman or Jay, one of them's not going to be there in the long run. That's just business. You can't
Yeah.
have two things like that. What's your take on that?
Well, in relation to Jay, I really think it depends on how this all shakes out. I mean, if this thing goes through and it ends up being a great deal for the players, he might be applauded for seeing it through.
Mm-hmm.
He's been criticized for not talking to them in the beginning, which I might defend him on because at the time he was trying very hard to 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 keep the PGA Tour as it is.
Right.
And and a lot of us would have thought that you'd fight them and not join forces with them. Should he have taken a phone call from them early on? Should he have at least listened? I think we've all come to realize that yeah, he should have. But I mean, in that moment, you know, I don't know. It's a tough one. And as far as Norman, I don't know how that works if Live is folded into the PGA Tour. I'm not quite sure how that happens. If there is an agreement and they're part of PGA Tour Enterprises, I'm not sure what Norman's role is. They've already outlined there will be a the entity will have Yasser as the chairman of the board, and
Mm-hmm.
Jay would be the CEO of that new company. And it would be the board seats would be filled with PGA Tour people. Now, it's very possible that all this is being negotiated right now, and that's started the things that we haven't heard yet.
Right. Well, I know you got to run here, bud, because there is live stuff happening, and keep us posted on that if you would. But I want to thank you, and I want to recommend that people get your book, Drive: The Lasting Legacy of Tiger Woods, Bob Harig. Anything you want to say? Sports Illustrated made the news. Uh, Anybody that covers sports or anything got news flashes about layoffs and that, but you're still there, and all is good.
Well, I mean, I think all is good remains to be seen.
Okay.
This is a we never stopped. We kept going. This is a business deal that is at the very very high levels.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think the mood is among my colleagues is no matter who prevails, no matter what happens, whether we're owned by Authentic Brands Group, they don't run SI. They give a license to someone to run it, which is the Arena Group, who's my employer. Whether the Arena Group continues to run SI, we feel if they don't, somebody else will. The brand is too big. It brings too much value. It still makes money. And once that squabbling is over, they're going to want to have us minions who do the work to put out the product still. So that's sort of how I'm looking at it. And, in the meantime, I just continue to do what I do.
I'll tell you what, I will stop reading it if I ever see you, Van Sickle, Maselli, any of those guys on the swimsuit edition on the cover. I'm not doing I got a line somewhere, Bob, and that's it. Okay.
I don't blame you. And you don't have to worry on my account. No
All
question.
right, Bob Harig. Thank you, buddy. Good luck with everything. And we'll be following up with you.
Thanks a lot, Jeff.
You
Loved
got
it.
it.
Good
We'll be
talking.
back. We'll be back next week with another show, another after hours. Take care. Go out, play some golf, and the Masters is coming, folks. Don't forget that.